self-aware of your own shortcuts. Excellent. Good. Okay. So I'm seeing somewhere between, it's a lot of like 7s to 10s. Okay. And that's good. And I think part of that 10 is like, not only am I aware of my shortcomings, but also I'm aware of the things I need to do to turn some of those things around, right? That was the whole thing that the authors of the Bible were trying to do, was like, hey, we contributed to this. It didn't have to happen this way. We didn't have to go into exile, because we could have been faithful to the covenant. We could have remained righteous and loyal to our God, but we didn't. Yeah.
There's also another level to them too, when they didn't really know what they were doing wrong, when they were told what they were doing, and many times they wouldn't repent.
Absolutely.
That's a problem they had.
Absolutely. Yeah, that showing the years and continuing down the path. Okay, so the next category is competing loyalties. So as we saw in Israel's history, this is constantly a problem, where they're constantly being pulled away by other deities, by other things that aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves, right? If I want security for me and my household, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless it begins to get out of order, and thus it becomes the ultimate thing, where I'm building a bunker and I have walls and you have to get a badge to get into my house, right? Like if it's now I can't be hospitable because I've elevated security too high. And so that's what I'm talking about with competing loyalties, is like, how organized do you think your own loyalties are? So 10 would be kind of the perfect organization, where God is at the top, and then he has his good things of loving him and loving others is kind of right below that, and then on all these good things are well ordered and organized in our lives. Where do you think you are this morning? One would be, there is no order, it's all chaos. I wake up every morning and don't really know what's going to happen that day, because whatever is competing for my attention, that's what's going to get all the attention that day. 6 over here. Okay, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7, 8. Excellent. Good. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to assess for yourself. And the primary way that we reorganize those things in our life is to return to God's story, right? His story is the properly ordered one. He created us outside of the garden and put us inside the garden, because that's how he wants things. And so to understand how he wants life ordered, how he has put his Torah, his instructions, his will together, that's how our lives should be organized. And so it's challenging to organize it in that way. It takes a lifelong set of habits to get us there. But that's a good thing to continue to question. Next one is fit in versus exile. So we've talked about this idea of being in exile. We've seen the story. We've seen it come up again and again. Where are you on that scale? So one is indistinguishable from the world. If you put you in a lineup, wouldn't be able to tell you from Adam. And then 10 is you are living an exile life, right? You are distinct, and yet at the same time not like cut off from the world. Because I think it's almost, I don't know if it's like a circle where, like, if you try to get too far down it, suddenly you're isolating yourself, and you're not. If you're too heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Is the same? Like if you're trying to isolate yourself so much that you can't affect things, then so anyways, 1 and then 10 is kind of, you have the proper exile mindset. Where are you at this morning? 8s, 7s, okay, 6s, 8s, okay. Abstaining, okay, I like it. What's that?
What number for like the isolation?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I almost feel like that's like almost like a Y scale or something on our line graph, right? You Because, what's that? Yeah. Because we saw that like in the end of our study in the Old Testament, where they kind of returned from exile, and suddenly it's like, let's put up these walls, let's put up these separations, these hard lines where we are not crossing over again, and let's even go further than what the law says and divorce these women that are not Israelites, right? And so it's like, whoa, like that's some serious isolation methods, and I think part of that lesson is that the isolation isn't the proper exile mindset. So maybe this is like almost like fit in or isolation over here. And then kingdom mindedness. And so this is kind of the same thing as our exile mindset. It's kind of a summation of all of these things, is that we are awaiting the return of the King. So we won't do that one, but I thought that was a good summary, especially thinking through the New Testament and how they treat this topic. Is that if you're set your mind on the things of the kingdom, set your mind on heavenly things, then that is kind of the language that's used in the New Testament.
It'd be interesting to compare, these are our individual thoughts of how we are individually, but as a body, it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Or if it begins.
That was going to be my next question, is where do you think the church is here at Springbrook? Where do you think we are? Are we self-critical enough, or are we not so much? Are we competing with other loyalties, or are we on the straight and narrow? Are we an exiled community? Is that how people would see us, or would there not be that much different from the bowling league down the street? There's no bowling leagues anymore. That's just an example from 20 years ago. We don't have to discuss it, but interesting to think about it. Okay. So last week we talked about Jesus extensively and how he kind of brings all of our stories to this climax where he's turning things to there's a possibility of a solution to this problem of sin and death that has plagued God's people for millennia. And so Jesus lives this exiled life. He is the one who is the tabernacle among us. He is the homeless, rejected by his own people, and he institutes baptism and the Lord's Supper as these exile motif driven rituals that he wants his disciples to continue to participate in, because they will continue to shape them along that story. And so the thing we kind of quickly ended on last week that I just wanted to touch base on one more time is Jesus' exile, his kind of exile life. It fulfills all the prophecy. It fulfills all these things that the Old Testament was hinting at and aiming towards. Jesus says that he's the one that you can find if you search the scriptures. And so, especially thinking about like the promise that God makes to Abraham, Genesis 12, right? I'm going to bless those who bless you. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bring blessing to you. You're going to have a great family, and I'm going to bless all peoples through you. How does Jesus fulfill those promises? He also promises him the land. How does Jesus fulfill those promises to Abram?
Well, in the beginning, it was Abraham and the Jewish population. Christ came and said the Great Commission right before he left, I want you to preach to all the Gentiles. So now you have Gentiles and Jews that are all tied to Abraham.
Yep. Yep. So he's increasing the scope of the aim of this project, or maybe kind of finally fulfilling this promise, you could say.
Kind of as
so it's this perfect final sacrifice, which brings, brings all things to their climax and conclusion, or not conclusion, but the climax for sure. And we're now living in the end days.
Also, Abraham was declared righteous through his faith.
Yep.
He did not do anything, he simply believed what God said was going to happen. And for us, our response to God's grace can be called faith. It becomes the summary title of everything that we engage in, whether repentance or conversion. Faith is the thing that describes our full response.
Yeah. Okay, so let's explore a few passages now in the letters. So we're going to start in Philippians, and we'll start in verse 17 here.
What chapter?
Sorry, 3. So I normally don't like jumping into the middle of a letter without lots of context, but we have a few passages we're going to look at, and Paul's language is kind of similar on all these fronts, so I think it'll be instructive to kind of think of them all together. Especially because these are, again, Paul's letters to these fairly new churches, and he's using similar language to each of them to help them understand how he expects them to behave now that they're followers of Jesus. So verse 17, join together in following my example, brothers and sisters, just as you have us as a model. Keep your eyes on those who live as we do. For as I have often told you before, and now tell you again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is set on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so they will be like his glorious body.
Amen.
Yeah. So just thinking about this citizenship in heaven, especially in relation to the exile, what do you note there? What stands out to you with Paul's language or this idea that he's drawing forth?
Well, God makes us pilgrims in an unholy land. My boy is a line from Raiders of the Lost Crusade. We're pilgrims here. We're longing for a better land.
Our bodies will be made like Jesus. You know, no sickness, no tears, none of that.
Yep.
He's describing two paths. One that he's modeling as living in exile, and one that's at home in the world, I guess. And he's encouraging them to follow his model, his path, his example that leads to a heavenly citizenship, I guess.
Yeah, look at some of the distinctions he makes, right? He says, you know, follow my example. Don't follow after these other things, right? So the other ones are enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach. Their glory is in their shame. Their mind is set on earthly things. Okay? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 descriptors there. With enemies kind of being the summary idea. And so destiny being destruction, fairly clear what that means. What's it mean that their God is their stomach?
Eating and drinking, partying.
Yeah, and appetites, remember, especially for ancient people, is a more kind of like encompassing idea. It's not just your hunger, but the stomach is kind of the seat of all emotions. It's the seat of all your feelings and things. And so if your stomach, if your guts are driving all that you do as your gods, then it's kind of this competing loyalties idea that we were talking about earlier. It's this, whatever I'm feeling right now, that must be the most important thing. And so that's what I'm going to pursue and chase. And so what would be the opposite of that?
Fasting.
Yeah, a very, very literal opposite, right? you master those appetites.
Paul will say later in Colossians, set your mind on things above, not on things below.
Yeah, it's this whole transformation idea that he's talking about a couple verses later. It's that you go from this earthly thing driven by these base desires to we can go all the way back to Cain and Abel, this story where God says, no, you master over those desires, right? You become the master of those, or else they're going to consume you. It's this like whole idea that it isn't that we're not Buddhists that are like separating ourselves from the world and trying to detach. Rather, we are taking this good body that God has given us and exercising discipline and mastery over it so that we can use it for his ends. And it will be transformed to be like Jesus, right? And so ultimately that's going to be like this beautiful transformation where we don't have any of these sicknesses and pains and terrors anymore. But it's also this like spiritual transformation. I met this guy when I was in 29 Palms, California, and he was this really old, really beat up guy. His name's Ralph, and he spent most of his life as kind of a missionary at the base there in 29 Palms, California. And so it's just middle of nowhere. He's just this guy, loves Jesus. He wants to tell all the Marines that are coming through. And if you know anything about Marines, it's not an easy job to tell them about Jesus. They got other things on their mind, to say the least. A lot of competing loyalties. And so, but he was always there, always showing up. And he was kind of at the end of his life when I really got to know him when I was there. And he spent a huge amount of time in prayer. He'd wake up in the middle of the night to just pray for hours. And he had this thing he would say. He's like, I gotta get rid of this anger, and I gotta get rid of this resentment. I gotta get rid of these all these things. He says because that's not what they do up in heaven. Is how he would put it. And so I thought that was such a interesting idea, interesting way to think about how we are being transformed now in preparation for what is to come. And so at some point there's going to be a magnificent transformation that will be beyond anything we can desire, but it's our job right now to prepare ourselves for that glory. And I think that's kind of what Paul is saying here. Let's turn to Ephesians now. Chapter 2. We talked about this a little bit last week, but this idea of including the Gentiles now into this new project is literally the subject of almost every letter in the New Testament. It's like a key idea, and they're trying to wrestle and figure out how to do this. Following Jesus or Jewish Messiah with a bunch of Gentiles, like how do we figure that? What are we supposed to do? What's that actually look like? That's what most of the book of Acts is about, and what most of the letters are about. So verse 11, he says, "Therefore remember that formerly you who are Gentiles by birth and called the uncircumcised by those who call themselves the circumcision, which is done in the body by human hands." Okay, so he's addressing Gentiles, right? Gentiles who are uncircumcised, Gentiles who are not part of the Jewish people. "Remember that at that time were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel, and foreigners to the covenants of the promise, without hope, without God in the world. But now, in Christ Jesus, you who were once far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. And so, thinking just about this little piece here, where do you see the same kinds of ideas that we just saw in Philippians, here in Ephesians? What parallels do you see?
It's talking about citizenship in heaven, so we're still exiles, pilgrims here on earth.
Yep. What else about citizenship?
Foreigners. But then we're redeemed.
Yeah, they were excluded from citizenship, excluded from the covenants, and now they're being brought in by the blood of Christ. Okay, so it's same kinds of ideas there. What about the bodily metaphors that he was using in Ephesians and now here? He's using different kinds of examples, but what's he saying here with this different, slightly different metaphor?
What, uncircumcised and the circumcision?
Yeah, done by the body, by human hands. Let's keep reading verse 14, maybe it'll become clear. For he himself is our peace, who's made the two groups one. He's destroyed the barrier, dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to you who were far away, and peace to those who were near. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. Consequently, you're no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people, and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord, and in him you two are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit.
So that suggests a sense of belonging. You now belong. You're part of God's grand scheme. You're part of God's family. Which, taken by itself, would give great comfort. But it's not the end of the story. You're also aliens in a foreign land. So both are true. I belong to God's people, and yet we all belong to separate places.
Absolutely. And so it's this kind of like balancing act, and I think in our small group that meets every week, we kind of have this like tension that we feel regularly, where it's like we love this small group and we want to see it grow. We love having what we have here at Springbrook, and we want to bring more people in so that they can share it with us. And it's like a tough thing to balance, because it's like too much loving what we got means that we are not welcoming to bringing people in, and too much welcoming to bringing people in is going to disrupt the thing that we got, right? And so it's like this tension that's still there. It's no longer Jews and Gentiles. This movement has been going on so long that there's very few Jews in most of our assemblies, and so now it's like the outside Gentiles versus the inside Gentiles. Like, how do we bring all of these people to Christ without betraying these principles of righteousness and holiness that we see here?
It's also interesting, tell you that we'll get our wrap later, that comparison between the two verses. Philippians, he talks about living a carnal life versus living a spiritual life. And just the
the other portion that I think we should consider briefly is this idea of the holy temple, right? If you were Jewish and what would your reaction be to somebody talking about this new temple in this way? What do you think? Or are you shaking your head no?
Yeah. No, this is the temple, and to make new temple, like, that's sacrilegious, you know, how to understand, so, yeah, I would not have a favorable opinion on the stuff we have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a temple, Paul. You know that. I've seen you there. I've seen you making sacrifices there. We already have a temple. So what are you? Right? And what's his point here? Why is he risking this scandal and offense to the Jewish people?
It was exclusive temple, basically, and he's saying, but now you're brought together to be the dwelling place for God through His Spirit.
Okay, so it was exclusive. Is the temple still exclusive?
Yes, but it's self-exclusive.
What do you mean?
Well, like, yeah, you exclude yourself, right? Like, you're not barred from coming. In fact, you're welcome to come, right? We want you to come. We want you to come. But it can be exclusionary because you can choose not to partake.
Okay. Is that the only thing that would exclude one from participating in the temple?
Well, you know, Jesus Christ is talking about the inside spiritual temple, which is him, compared to Solomon's temple, which was made of gold and much splendor. So there would be a problem with Jews are still, go back to Solomon's temple, because it was the most magnificent temple in his time. But when we go back to Jesus Christ, the temple's he's talking about, he is the temple, the spiritual temple, is what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was hard for some of the Jews to get that, in that time, to get Solomon's temple out of their head, because it was such a magnificent temple. Pure gold, the Ark of the Covenant in there, and, you know, cherubim, angels on the mercy seat. So now that went off, and after that, then Jesus Christ became the temple of the New Testament. So I think it's hard for Jews to get that, going, you know, to remember that it was passed down for generations about Solomon's temple.
Yeah, and so the physical temple, the Solomon's temple or the second temple, those places were exclusionary for Gentiles, right? You can only get so close. It's exclusionary for Jews, unless you're a Levite, you can only get so close. It's exclusionary for Levites, unless you're a priest descended from Moses or Aaron, you can only get so close. And it's exclusionary for priests because unless you're the high priest, you can only get so close. Is Jesus' temple the same way?
Didn't it say that we're the temple and Jesus is the cornerstone? So we're actually the temple.
Yeah.
And Jesus removed the thing was taken when he was separated, the clothing, the curtain. He took that out, so now we have pure access straight to him now,
Mm-hmm.
straight to God through Jesus.
And Peter makes the beautiful comparison of living stones.
Yeah.
We are a living temple made of, we are a temple made of living stones.
Yeah, and I think that temple was always pointing to the church. And that the reason that the nation of Israel fails, one of the primary reasons, is because of all the work that Solomon forces his own people and all the nations around him to do to build this grand temple, right? It basically crumbles in on itself because it was such a splendor to behold, such a beautiful thing to create and bring in. And that temple holds God's spirit, right? contain it or limit it or some way, but God dwells within that building because of the glory that Solomon poured into it. And it's always pointing to the church, right, to us as people. And so for me, it's like, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot for me, it feels like it's a lot to live up to. Like, we ought to be as holy and righteous and splendid as that temple, as his body, right? That's what we're meant to be. And at some point, again, we're going to have this transformation that's going to realize what we're aiming at, what we're pointed to. So it's not that we are meant to earn this kind of thing, but I do think it's meant that we're supposed to practice and aim ourselves and our families in that direction, so that we can become more and more splendid, so that it draws all people to Jesus. Because at one point, when that transformation happens, the temple will be complete. There won't be more to add to it. It'll be the end of the line. So those who have not joined in, there's not a second chance. Last thing I want to do is just end us in Revelation, this beautiful image here. Revelation chapter 21. I know Revelation is a wildly complicated book that summarizes and completes the entire canon. And so to just jump into the last chapters is not going to do it justice. But it is a beautiful image here. And so chapter 21, verse 1, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who is seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' And he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.' He said to me, 'It is done. I'm the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I'll give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children.' Excuse me. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they'll be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." And then just chapter 22, we could look at this golden city, its gates. It talks about how there's verse 22, it says, "I didn't see a temple in the city." And so it's like, clearly, we're talking in metaphors and images and these things to help us understand what it's going to be like. We can't actually imagine and understand those things. But it's important to see that we are meant to be aimed and pointed at this beautiful reality, right? This fulfillment of God's desire to be with his people once again. And so that's my hope for you, is that you'll continue faithfully down that path as exiles with me, with each other, and that we'll continue to become his people awaiting his return. Any final comments or thoughts before we wrap up today? Awesome. We'll be in Matthew starting next week. We're going to be studying the Sermon on the Mount, specifically chapter 6. It's going to be our core text for our study. I'm going to be preaching on it today as a refresher. But yeah, hopefully we'll see you next week. If I could ask each one of you to think about a couple people that aren't here with us in our adult study, and just invite them to come out. A lot of people just need a reminder, need somebody to say, hey, you should come to the study. And if two or three of you, or if you ask 2 or 3 people, everybody in here is going to choose the same, they're going to overlap. And so when you get 2 or 3 invites, you're more likely to come than if you just get one invite. Thank you.